Why risk saying hi, when Jin-Woo could lose his temper over just one wrong look? Even though they were all hunters of magical creatures, everyone avoided eye contact. After a lunch provided by the Hunter Command Center, they headed to the main hall, where people gave presentations on various topics. None caught Jin-Woo's interest since most discussions were about current events. He wished Jin-Woo were there, things would have been way less boring, so he waited, hoping something exciting would finally catch his eye. One day, a lecture really grabbed Jin-Woo's attention though. It wasn't exactly what he'd been waiting for. We've all heard that these gates have been popping up, bringing with them some seriously powerful magical creatures. The scientist said, but this wasn't news to anyone in the room. Others had already talked about it earlier, so most people weren't very interested. Then the scientist dropped something surprising. But here's what you might not know, something weird has been spotted in the sky. Instantly the hunters, including Jin-Woo, sat up straight. The scientist, now that he had everyone's attention, continued excitedly. Others have pointed out that there's way more magic in the air lately. Let's call this magical stuff in the air. Magic matters for now, Dr. Belzer said with a smile. He turned to a big world map on the screen behind him, and used a red laser pointer to zoom in on several spots. Check this out. This magic matter is clustered in the skies above different countries. The hunters started buzzing with excitement. The scientist stood quietly until everyone settled down. There are 9 places around the world where magic matter has gathered, he announced. The doctor then listed them off: the province of Alberta in Canada, and finally, Seoul, South Korea, where the most magic matter is found. As soon as Jin-Woo heard this through his translator device, the other hunters turned their heads to look at him, their eyes filled with curiosity and interest. Jin-Woo had read the article about himself on the ride here, and he could tell from their stares that everyone else had too. It was obvious how they were looking at him, and it was changing how they saw him. As Jin-Woo glanced around at the other hunters, every single one of them looked away. He let out a sigh as he saw the fear in their eyes. This wasn't going well. Clearly, there had been some big misunderstanding. But for now Jin-Woo just had to wait and hope that the Hunter Command Center would step in and fix things. Dr. Belzer tried to break the awkward silence with a joke. I read the article too this morning, he said. But don't hold it against Hunter Sung. If he were behind all this magic stuff, he wouldn't be a hunter, right? Dr. Belzer burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. The room filled with nervous chuckles before she continued. You've probably figured out by now that I haven't found any connection between these places. Finding the cause would be tough since there's no link between them, especially with something this strange happening for the first time. The scientist clicked a button and a new picture popped up on the screen. Check this out, he said with a smile. This image shows the skies above those 9 spots we were talking about earlier. He went on to explain that a super cool satellite camera, designed specifically to detect magic energy, had captured this photo. The picture had been made brighter and clearer so everyone could see it easily. When they looked closely, people noticed glowing clusters of magical energy, floating high above the 9 locations. It was like nothing anyone in the room had ever seen before. In person, it wouldn't have looked too bad, but even without the zoomed-in images, something about it seemed off. One hunter muttered, then another breathed. Whoa. The hunters stared at the big screen in shock, trying to figure out what was going on and fast. Above Seoul, the sky looked really weird, as if it was the center of a storm. Jin-Woo couldn't help but wonder why was the number 9 so important. Could it have something to do with the 9 monarchs? It had to mean something, right? But then he remembered, the King of Giants was already gone, so maybe the number 9 didn't matter as much anymore. Just then, Dr. Belzer glanced over at Jin-Woo, and their eyes met again. This time though the doctor wasn't laughing. We don't really know how to deal with this phenomenon, he said, wrapping up his long presentation, but we have to figure it out because our world is about to change in a big way again. The meeting was over, and now Mr. Brannan, the director of the Hunter Command Center, stepped onto the stage. He had something important to announce. His surprise visit caused a big commotion. Would he finally explain what happened last night? The director stepped in, urging everyone to calm down. I need to share something super important, he said. The room was buzzing with excitement. These hunters were the best of the best. We're not a bunch of noisy kids on a field trip, he reminded them with a grin. The director paused for dramatic effect, and the room fell into a heavy silence. Most people can't even imagine how focused top-tier hunters are. It's just something they're born with. Mr. Brannan nodded as he scanned the room, his eyes locking onto Jin-Woo. Hunter Jin-Woo sung. He knew all about what happened yesterday, and couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude toward the man who'd saved Thomas's life. The other hunters started to murmur as they noticed the director looking at Jin-Woo. After a short silence, Mr. Brannon spoke up with a heavy heart. "I'm sorry to tell you that." He paused, then continued. 2 weeks ago, Hunter Christopher Reed was killed by unknown attackers. The room fell silent, and the hunters looked at each other in shock. Jin-Woo knew this was the moment he had been waiting for. The news sent chills through everyone there. Imagine hearing that one of the most powerful hunters was murdered. It's even crazier than what happened with Jin-Woo. This wasn't just about who won or lost a fight between two strong hunters. The director showed some shocking stuff on a screen. A mansion burned to ashes, remnants of a fire, and the body of Christopher Reed with a huge hole in his chest. Groans filled the room as the pictures made it clear. One of the country's top hunters was dead. It was obvious that Christopher had been murdered, and no one could argue with that fact. Director Brannon was bombarded with questions from everyone, but he waved them away. "Sorry everyone," he said, "but let's get to the facts before we take questions." He had bigger things on his plate than answering questions right then. The director quickly looked over at Jin-Woo, who was sitting quietly in the corner, thinking about what was happening. Director Brannon felt a mix of emotions about how calm Jin-Woo seemed, but there wasn't time to think about it. He pressed a button on his remote, and a new picture popped up on the screen. "This is our main suspect," he said. The face of an Asian man appeared clearly on the screen. The hunters noticed something strange right away. He looked a lot like someone else in the room. But with what had just happened to Thomas still fresh in their minds, no one wanted to say anything out loud. Jin-Woo's lips tightened into a thin line. The photo must have been taken when a man was brought to the Hunter Command Center for identification. It looked just like his dad. Jin-Woo bit down on his lip. Confused and worried. "Why is my father here?" he wondered. Dungeons were places controlled by powerful beings known as rulers. But Jin-Woo had no idea why they would send a monster that looked exactly like his father. He could feel the anger boiling inside him, but the other hunters thought he was mad about something else. They avoided looking his way, trying hard not to catch his eye. "Don't look back. Don't look back," he told himself. "They only look alike. It's just a coincidence. Some people often said that Asians looked similar to one another, right?" But no matter how he studied that picture, something felt off. The director called Ilwan Sung's suspect. He explained where suspects had been found, what happened when they discovered him, and everything that followed. The hunters were totally caught off guard when they heard he had beaten up Dong-Soo Hachwan during questioning and managed to escape. Dong-Soo Hachwan was no ordinary guy. He was someone the Hunter Command Center had handpicked because of his amazing skills and brought all the way to the US. On top of that, he was a top hunter in the Scavenger Guild, one of the most elite groups in the world. But since no one knew Dong-Soo was dead yet, the news that he had lost a fight was super shocking. Wait, that doesn't add up. Even the best hunters in the country wouldn't last long against someone as strong as Dong-Soo and his team. No wonder everyone thought suspects was the bad guy. Director Brannon kept talking. "The Hunter Command Center has figured out what happened. Humanoid magic beasts from a dungeon attacked Hunter Reed." While he spoke, a video played on the screen behind him. It showed suspect standing on Dong-Soo's neck, and it made everything even more intense. Seeing suspects crush such a powerful S-rank hunter like Dong-Soo Hagkwang like he was nothing was super scary for everyone watching, but Jin-Woo wasn't shocked at all. He knew the rulers had the power to create dungeons, and they had made suspects a magic beast with a specific plan in mind. Honestly, it would have been way weirder if Dong-Soo Hagkwang had actually won. Jin-Woo stayed focused on suspects, trying to figure out what was going on. Jin-Woo's eyes widened in surprise as he watched the footage. Was that guy really talking to Dong-Soo? Jin-Woo leaned in closer, focusing like he did during battles. Everything seemed to slow down as he carefully read the man's lips. "Don't ever come back to Korea," Suspectus was saying. "I'm not warning you for my son's sake. This is for your own good. You won't even be able to close your eyes when you're dead." Jin-Woo's heart pounded like a drum in his chest. Wait, did he just say that even after dying, Jin-Woo wouldn't be able to close his eyes? If Jin-Woo had lip-read correctly, Suspectus must know who he really was. Luckily, Jin-Woo had a simpler way to check what they were talking about. Jin-Woo quickly called out to the newest member of his shadow army. "Greed," he said, his voice urgent. The new soldier instantly understood what Jin-Woo was asking. It's exactly what you think, my king, Greed replied, their tone sharp and clear. Meanwhile Jin-Woo's mind was a whirlwind. As the director wrapped up a long explanation, we're asking everyone around the world to keep an eye out for suspect. The director announced, if anyone finds this man, please contact us right away. That's all. The director closed the file, and instantly questions came pouring back like water from a burst dam. Hands shot up everywhere. Yes, you with the bow, the director said, gesturing toward a hunter in the crowd. What's your question? Do we have any proof that suspect C isn't human? Someone asked. Well, the director replied, his magic looks exactly like a wild creature's. Next question. But earlier you mentioned he claimed to be a man who disappeared in a dungeon. Another person pointed out. Was this hunter he talked about real? Someone asked. Director Brannon gave a quick nod. Yes, he did exist. Then he pointed to the next person in line. Next question. But before anyone else could ask anything, another voice piped up. If he's real, why won't you tell us who he is? The director shifted uncomfortably, and tried his best not to look at Jin-Woo. We're keeping his identity secret, he said finally, because this person is connected to one of the hunters here. The room fell silent. Everyone exchanged glances, their suspicions confirmed without a word. Director Brannon adjusted his glasses nervously, cleared his throat, and stepped off the stage. Any last questions? Someone asked, and hands shot up from the back of the room before the director even had time to point. Everyone turned to look. The person speaking had a deep voice, and was asking, why not just reveal his identity? Wouldn't that make it easier to find him? The room could tell who it was, by the voice alone. It was Chugong Lu, the famous 7-star hunter, known across the country. Chugong stood surrounded by his fellow hunters, all of whom were among the best in China. His serious expression never wavered as he waited for Director Brannon to respond. The director hesitated, unsure of what to say. Chugong pushed him again. Don't you agree, Mr. Brannon? The Hunter Command Center had wanted to keep suspect Sin's information secret, but Brannon couldn't find a reason to refuse. With a beep he pressed the remote control, and Ilwan Sung's details appeared on the screen. The room filled with gasps and whispers as everyone reacted to what they saw. The hunters were stunned when the first humanoid magic beast from the dungeon looked exactly like Jin-Woo's missing dad. Was this just a crazy coincidence? Jin checked the screen, then raised his hand again. The director nodded at him. Hunter Liu, he said. Xing had a question for Hunter Sung. Everyone turned to Jin-Woo, who nodded and faced Jin-Woo. The room fell silent, as Jing's voice boomed out loud and clear. If suspects really is your missing father and hunters try to take him down, what will you do? As Jin-Woo thought for a moment. If he's a magic beast I'll stop him myself. But if he's actually my dad. Everyone waited to hear what he'd say next. Jin-Woo took a deep breath. I'll protect my family, no matter what, even if it means going against all the hunters. Were you serious about that? Adam asked when Jin-Woo came out of the conference room. Jin-Woo knew exactly what the agent was asking about. He flashed a grin. Yes. Adam couldn't help it. Jin-Woo's smile was infectious. Even if this wasn't a moment for laughter. In that room were over 500 of the world's most powerful hunters. Handpicked from 12, Jin-Woo had just told them all. He wouldn't hesitate to become their enemy. That kind of statement required more than just courage, it needed sheer confidence. What really shocked Adam? Not a single person in the room laughed, or mocked Jin-Woo for it. Ji-Gang was known as a tough-as-nails guy. But even he stayed quiet after Jin-Woo made his big statement. The agents at the Hunter Command Center were glued to their screens, watching everything go down. Adam too was caught off guard. His mouth dropped open like everyone else. After a moment, Adam broke the silence. Wow, he said, clearly impressed. Only 2 people in the entire world could get away with saying something like that to those guys. Hunter Sung. Jin-Woo's curiosity was piqued. Who's that other person? He's in the hospital right now. Adam said this with a smirk that made it super clear who he was talking about. Thinking back on how full of himself Thomas had always been, it actually made sense. But honestly, I'm not sure Thomas has much to brag about anymore. Jin-Woo let out a small smile as he remembered the look on Thomas's face when he gave up. Then Adam started explaining what they needed to do next. Heads up. Next up is the dinner party. The Hunter Command Center is pulling out all the stops. So if you don't have anything super important to do. Jin-Woo shook his head. I'm heading to the hospital instead. Wait. Really? Adam asked, looking confused. Was Jin-Woo hurt last night? That wouldn't be a surprise. The fight had been super intense, and Thomas, one of the top hunters in the country, got so badly injured that even the healers couldn't save him. Jin-Woo probably had some bruises or scrapes from his battles, but Adam was really worried about him. I'm worried about Jinyo, Adam said. Jin-Woo replied, sounding confused. Adam hesitated, then asked, Are you feeling any pain in your shoulder or wrist from last night? Before Jin-Woo could answer, Adam suddenly looked flustered and waved it off. Never mind. They had noticed a group of hunters nearby talking in huddles. The hunters stepped aside to let someone through, and Jidong Liu walked up with his team, heading straight for Jin-Woo. The room fell silent as the tension between Jin-Woo and Jidong became impossible to ignore. The other hunters exchanged uneasy glances. Clearly confused. What was Jidong Liu thinking? Was this because of what Hunter Sung had said earlier? It seemed strange that Liu wasn't making a bigger deal about it. After all, Jin-Woo was obviously trying to get under everyone's skin, and Jidong had been the one who started the conversation in the first place. Now that Thomas was out, would Jidong be next? Everyone could tell something was about to happen. The others kept a close eye on the hunters, watching their every move. Adam had accidentally found himself stuck between them, and turned pale. He tried to speak up. Excuse me, sirs, but quickly closed his mouth when Jidong took a step closer, ready to say something. Jin-Woo looked super serious while listening. He had no idea what was being said because he didn't understand a word of Chinese. He tried to keep a straight face matching Zijang's serious expression. Luckily it didn't seem like anyone was making fun of him, or saying anything mean. Just then, Adam leaned in, and whispered something quickly in Jin-Woo's ear. Jin-Woo's eyes widened in surprise as he stared at Adam. He claims he took down that giant magic beast that got away from you in Japan. Jin-Woo asked, shocked. Adam shrugged casually. Yeah, and guess what? I can speak Chinese too. You're kidding me, Jin-Woo exclaimed. Adam grinned. Nope, since I run the Asian branch, I picked up a bunch of languages, Chinese, Japanese, and even some Russian, Spanish, Arabic and German. For a moment, Jin-Woo thought how awesome it'd be to have someone as skilled as Adam on his team, but he quickly snapped back to reality. Xingang didn't stop talking, like he had a million things to tell Jin-Woo. I'm counting on you, he said seriously. Adam nodded with determination. Got it. He kept translating, helping Jin-Woo understand what Xingang was saying. Hunter Liu couldn't believe how strong the magic beast was. It was way tougher than he thought. Fighting that giant in water made things especially tricky. Jin-Woo knew exactly what Xingang was going through. Those giants might be huge, but they were also super fast. Battling one in water instead of on land must have been a real challenge for Xingang. As Xingang kept talking, Adam's face lit up with excitement. Ever since then, Hunter Sung has been dying to meet you, Adam translated with a grin. He's super curious about the hunter who took down all those powerful magic beasts without breaking a sweat. As soon as Adam finished, Xinggang's serious face finally softened into a warm smile. He reached out and held up his hand like he was excited to make friends. Jin-Woo smiled back and gave him a firm handshake. It turned out Xinggang's tough look was just because he was nervous the whole time. Why would Adam say no to a handshake from one of the best hunters around? Now that he knew everything was fine, he could finally relax. Phew, he breathed. This was exactly what the International Guild Conference was all about, bringing hunters together. Xingang laughed as he said something else. Jin-Woo glanced back at Adam, and asked, Is he telling a joke? Adam listened for a moment, then grinned. Oh, he said, chuckling along with the others. He's glad you called him out, Jin-Woo said, smirking. He thinks Hunter Andre probably had it coming, even though he wasn't there to see it. Xingang seemed grumpy at first, but now Jin-Woo couldn't help but grin. For a middle-aged guy, Xingang was turning out to be way funnier than expected. After that, the two of them let go of each other's hands and kept talking. Xinggang's expression suddenly turned serious. The smile on Adam's face disappeared too, as he quickly translated Xinggang's words. He really hopes that Suspects isn't your dad, Adam said. He doesn't want to fight you, Hunter Sung. Then, a voice called out, Where have you two been? Both Jin-Woo and Zgang turned to see who was talking. This person stood out in a way that caught their attention, but there was no sign of any special powers. That meant one thing: they weren't a hunter. Just as they had guessed, their eyes settled on a familiar face, the director of the Hunter Command Center. The director glanced at them nervously and asked, "Could I bother you two for a minute?" Jin-Woo turned to Adam, but Adam just shook his head. Jin-Woo had no clue what was going on. He looked around, trying to make sense of things. Then he noticed two people with a ton of magic power, way more than usual. They were being led by guards in the same direction. Since Jin-Woo and Zichi had both been approached at the same time, he figured this wasn't just a random thing happening. Something must have gone down. Noticing Jin-Woo's confusion, Adam decided to jump into the conversation. "Hey, mister, Hunter Sung needs to go to the hospital where Hunter Jin-Woo is staying," Jin-Woo said, putting his hand on Adam's shoulder. He shook his head and turned to the director. "I've got time." The director grinned and looked at Zgang. "How about you, Hunter Liu?" "Sure thing," Chugong replied. The director nodded, clearly happy with himself, and led the way. But their destinations were different. Chugong was led down a hallway to the left by agents while Jin-Woo kept following the director. That's strange, Jin-Woo thought. 3 strong hunters, Chugong and 2 others with powerful magic energy, who had gone ahead earlier, were being gathered together in one place. Jin-Woo expected to join them, but instead, he was being taken somewhere else. He tried to come up with a few theories before finally asking, "Why am I the only one going in a different direction?" Director Brannon thought for a moment, but then passed the buck. "There's someone waiting for you, she'll explain everything." Jin-Woo sensed a presence coming from the room at the end of the hall. Bimta. This magic signature is, he hadn't expected to ever see her again. "I see you already know who it is," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. The nervous director wiped sweat from his brow. "We've gone to great lengths to keep her hidden away, but this situation is too important." "Did the Hunter Command Center ask her to do this?" "No, not at all," came the quick reply. "Someone had asked to meet him," Director Brannon said with a smile. He opened the door and Jin-Woo found himself face to face with a woman he hadn't seen in years. "Long time no see, Hunter Sung," she said, her voice warm but crisp. "Not at all, Mrs. Selner," Jin-Woo replied politely. The woman, Norma Selner, was known as an upgrader, someone with the rare ability to boost other people's powers. Jin-Woo couldn't help but notice that even after all this time, her eyes were still as sharp and intense as ever. Jin-Woo's heart still raced whenever she looked at him, but something made her agree to meet him again. "I didn't expect to see you again," he said quietly, sitting down across from Mrs. Selner. Adam stayed close to Jin-Woo, acting as his interpreter. Selner dipped her head respectfully toward Jin-Woo. "I'm sorry about what happened last time," she said softly. "My head wasn't in a good place back then," and Jin-Woo lifted his hand, stopping her mid-sentence. He hadn't meant to bring up the past, or make her feel like she needed to apologize. Selner glanced over at the director, who gave her a firm nod of encouragement. She hesitated but finally spoke, her voice shaky. "I've been having the same dream every night." Jin-Woo figured this wasn't why he was called here, so he asked, "What happens in this dream?" "In my dream," she said, "the strongest hunters become the prey instead of the predators. Someone hunting hunters." Jin-Woo had a feeling this might involve him. "And then," she continued, her voice trembling, "a few days later, it happens for real." "Are you talking about Christopher Reed?" Jin-Woo asked, his curiosity growing.